Indirect contacts between Iran and the United States have resumed after weeks of escalatory pressure and open warfare in the region. But Tehran is sending two messages at once. It is willing to keep a channel alive, and it has no intention of softening its public posture toward Washington. On one track, a senior Iranian lawmaker has delivered a combative warning that, in Iran's view, the negotiations are a battlefield of their own, a place to press demands, project strength, and frame the narrative, not a signal of trust. On another, a senior Iranian diplomat has described a grueling, nearly day-long round of talks mediated by Pakistan that produced limited understandings on some points but broke down on core disputes. The talks come as President Donald Trump's administration searches for a formula to shore up a fragile ceasefire and contain a conflict that has already spilled into sea lanes and energy markets, while Iran's leadership works to convince its own public that diplomat. AC does not mean retreat, and that leverage, including over the Strait of Hormuz, remains firmly in Iranian hands. The lawmaker's message was blunt from the start. Iran is present at the table, but it does not believe the United States can be trusted. In his words, asterisk, he said, "We have now officially entered into a new phase of diplomatic negotiations. However, we must state unequivocally that we do not, under any circumstances, trust the Americans." After tax, he framed Iran's participation not as a leap toward reconciliation, but as a tactical decision rooted in what he called realities on the ground. He used the moment to deliver a broader political argument that Washington is paying a reputational price for aligning itself so closely with Israel, language that was aimed as much at global audiences as it was at Iranian voters and lawmakers. He insisted the United States should not, as he put it, bind itself to Israel in ways that he claimed have isolated Washington internationally. Asterisk, he said if Americans want to avoid further damage to their reputation, they should not so closely tie themselves to the dirty and weak rope of the Zionist regime. Asterisk, he argued that even countries traditionally close to the United States had, in his telling, hesitated to cooperate with recent military actions because they viewed U.S. conduct as violating basic principles and international norms. The point was delivered as a warning. Continue down this path, he suggested, and Washington will find itself more alone and more vulnerable to international pressure. At home, the lawmaker tried to manage expectations and discourage political speculation about what negotiations might produce. He urged Iran's political institutions to judge the process only by tangible outcomes and to prepare for the possibility that talks may deliver little even if they continue. The overall framing was clear. Iran will talk, but Iran will not appear to bend. He escalated his rhetoric with unusually personal attacks on President Trump, portraying the U.S. leadership as emotionally unstable and fundamentally unreliable. Asterisks, he said the Americans are untrustworthy, especially the current administration, and particularly the delusional, narcissistic, and unbalanced President of America. We have absolutely no trust in them. That line went well beyond standard diplomatic skepticism, signaling a deliberate choice to harden the public tone, even as contacts resumed behind closed doors. Yet the lawmaker also made clear that Tehran sees negotiation as useful precisely because it can be used as a platform. In his telling, diplomacy is not separate from deterrence. It is part of the same campaign. Asterisks, he said, however, our presence in this negotiations is to articulate the legitimate demands of the Iranian nation and to establish the justice of our cause on this very stage and to declare that we are both powerfully advancing on the battlefield and also in the negotiation. Asterisks, the harshest and controversial portion of his remarks pushed into conspiracy-laden territory, linking President Trump to the long-running Jeffrey Epstein scandal and insinuating without evidence that Israel could be using compromising material to influence U.S. decision-making. Epstein, the wealthy financier who died in jail in 2019 while awaiting trial on federal sex trafficking charges, remains a persistent magnet for conspiracy theories worldwide, and Iranian officials and allying media have repeatedly used the story as a political weapon. The lawmaker leaned into that discourse as an alleged explanation for U.S. choices in the war and in diplomacy. He said, "We believe it's highly, highly probable the American president has gotten himself into the significant mess concerning Epstein." He suggested the U.S. leader might fear the release of what he described as disgraceful documents and implied this fear could be shaping Washington's posture. He presented the idea as conjecture, but delivered it in a way designed to inflame, to delegitimize U.S. motives, and to portray American policy as driven by vulnerability and coercion rather than strategy. After those claims, he returned to a far more material lever, the Strait of Hormuz. The strait is one of the world's most important maritime choke points, central to the movement of oil and liquefied natural gas, and a critical factor in global shipping costs and insurance rates. Any perception of disruption can immediately jolt markets. Over the years, Iran has repeatedly hinted that it could use its geographic position to retaliate against sanctions or military pressure, even while also asserting that it prefers stability and safe passage. This time, the lawmaker insisted the strait is not a bargaining chip in the way outsiders may expect. He said the issue of the Strait of Hormuz is not a matter we will ever play games with through negotiations, nor will we ever agree to close or open it based on any talks. And that on he went further, asserting a claim that functions as political messaging rather than a straightforward reflection of international maritime law. He said it unequivocally belongs to Islamic Iran. International law treats the waterway as an international strait used for global transit, with navigational rights that do not depend on the permission of a single coastal state. But Iran's emphasis was unmistakable. It wants to present itself as the indispensable security actor in the corridor and to reserve the right to regulate, condition, or potentially monetize that role. The lawmaker argued that Iran has historically allowed vessels to pass with what he called patience and hospitality, and that Iranian forces have often responded when incidents occurred at sea. He then asked why, in his view, that security role should be provided without compensation, raising the idea that Iran could seek charges or conditions through legislation. The implication was that geography is not a strategic advantage, but also an economic lever, particularly during wartime when maritime risk rises and states look for ways to offset costs. His message aligned with a broader domestic narrative that Iran can turn pressure into power and that institutions like Parliament should play a role in codifying how the state uses its leverage. He also pointed to what he described as a trinity of power Iran displayed during a recent conflict period he called a 40-day war, linking missile capability, popular mobilization, and leadership as mutually reinforcing pillars. The language was designed to project deterrence and unity and to argue that Iran's battlefield momentum strengthens its hand at the negotiating table, not the other way around. He referenced a strike on a figure he called Martyr Haji Saad without providing details, but the mention served a purpose: to signal sacrifice, continuity, and the idea that losses will be absorbed and answered, not used as a reason to and promise. While that hardline voice sought to rally domestic audiences and warn foreign capitals, a separate account from Iran's diplomatic side described the talks themselves in procedural terms, still skeptical, still shaped by conflict, but grounded in the mechanics of negotiation. A senior Iranian diplomat said the latest round involved marathon indirect discussions facilitated by Pakistan. The exchanges, he said, ran nearly nonstop for roughly a full day with messages passed back and forth continuously, including through the night. He portrayed it as one of the longest sessions Iran has experienced in the past year, and he credited Pakistan's role as mediator and host. The diplomat described a familiar pattern: partial progress on some issues, deadlock on the most important ones. Asterisks. He said the reality is on a number of different issues we have come to some understandings. However, regarding 2 or 3 crucial issues, the perspectives were quite divergent and ultimate. These discussions did not lead to any consensus or agreement. He did not name the 2 or 3 core disputes, but the contours are not hard to guess. Questions tied to Iran's nuclear program, the depth and sequencing of sanctions relief, verification and inspections, regional security demands, and the political choreography each side needs to sell any arrangement at home. If the United States wants to show that it has constrained Iran's nuclear capacity and restored deterrence, Tehran will likely demand tangible economic relief and guarantees that the deal will not collapse under domestic U.S. politics. Asked whether diplomacy was ending or continuing, the diplomat insisted the process should not be viewed as a one-off event. He framed diplomacy as an ongoing tool of statecraft in war and in peace, less a hopeful gesture than a duty tied to national interest. He said the work of diplomacy, you see, is never truly concluded. He placed the latest contacts in the shadow of recent hostilities, describing an environment saturated with distrust, suspicion, and animosity. He accused the United States of military aggression in coordination with Israel, claiming it had happened twice within 9 months. Context offered as justification for why no one should expect a comprehensive agreement quickly. In his telling, the complexity of the issues and the depth of the wounds mean that even long sessions can end without breakthrough. He also said the agenda has widened beyond nuclear and sanctions questions. New files have entered the discussions, including the Strait of Hormuz and broader regional issues, topics with their own conditions and red lines that are harder to settle on short timelines. The inclusion of Hormuz is especially significant because it is not merely an abstract geopolitical concept. It is a live pressure point affecting shipping, energy flows, and insurance premiums, and it is now explicitly being folded into the diplomatic equation. The diplomat explicitly thanked Pakistan's civilian and military leadership for facilitating the talks and for what he described as intensified efforts in recent weeks and in the last few days. Pakistan, which maintains relationships with both Tehran and Washington, has positioned itself as a key intermediary, a role that is politically valuable for Islamabad and potentially stabilizing for the region, even as the war continues to test the limits of diplomacy. Taken together, the two strands of Iranian messaging show a coordinated strategy, keep the channel open while hardening public expectations. The political line is designed to rally domestic audiences and warn foreign capitals. Iran will talk, but it will not trust. It will not accept negotiation as a substitute for deterrence. It will present the Strait of Hormuz not as a favor it grants the world, but as an arena where Iran can assert power, including through legislation and policy choices, and potentially demand compensation. For security it claims it provides, the diplomatic line signals something else. Iran is willing to spend long hours in indirect exchanges to explore partial understandings and keep the process alive, but the deepest disagreements remain unresolved. The diplomat's account also implies that even when the channel is open, it is constrained by major gaps and by a poisonous atmosphere created by strikes, casualties, and mutual accusations. For the United States, led by President Trump with Vice President J.D. Vance involved in recent rounds of engagement, the central challenge is finding a framework that reduces the risk of renewed escalation and can be defended as a win, preventing further attacks, protecting shipping routes, and addressing nuclear concerns while managing the political optics of talking with an adversary during wartime. For Iran, led by President Masoud Pezeshkian with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi as the diplomatic face of Tehran's strategy, the balancing act is equally stark. Negotiate without appearing to concede, project strength without closing the door to a deal that could ease economic pressure, and keep domestic unity intact by insisting that diplomacy is a tool of resistance, not a retreat. The immediate question is whether the indirect channel can produce a framework both sides can sell at home, or whether it will operate mainly as a pressure release valve, buying time while tensions persist across the region and while the Strait of Hormuz remains not just a line on a map, but a lever that can shake the global economy in an instant.